Hi, I'm Diane Dieterich of C3D, and today we're going to talk about creating some painterly images using Podium and Photoshop. Here's an image of an interior bar area that was created using SketchUp and rendered in Podium. But sometimes you're concerned that if something is too photoreal and too crisp, your client might be a little too locked into this is the exact detailing that it's going to look like in the end. Or sometimes you just want a different kind of feeling to present to the client when they're looking at your design. So today we're going to take this image and make it look a little more painterly by using some very quick steps in Photoshop. And I think I've mentioned before, I'm not a Photoshop whiz, so this is easy for me, but also easy for you to replicate. So this is the SketchUp model that I used for the final rendering. And this is how the final rendering turned out. It's fine, it's okay, but going along with what the client really wanted, a little more painterly image, this is the image that we actually presented to the client. So let me show you the 3 different steps that go to put this together. And here you can see in Photoshop the 3 different layers that I've combined together. So here's the final rendering. I also created a level called Paint Daubs, which is just adding a Photoshop filter to the final rendering. And then we overlaid that with line work that we pulled directly from the SketchUp model. So let me show you how those 3 steps come together. So the first thing I'm going to do is note what size I rendered this at. So I'm going to go to my options. And you can see that I've made the image size, it's pretty large, it's 4000 by 2000 because I want to print this out as a large board. So I'm going to go to Photoshop, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to create an image that's the same size, which is just my blank canvas. So that's going to be 4000 by 2000, and I'm going to create that. And then I'm going to go to File, Place Linked, and I'm going to go to my final rendering and import that in. So right now it's kind of dark, but honestly once I add these other layers I'm going to have to adjust the levels anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. So the next thing I'm going to do is use Photoshop's artistic filters to create that more painterly effect. So I've opened up the final rendering here, and I'm going to go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and that's going to open up a variety of different kinds of filters, and I usually work with this artistic level. If you suddenly can't see your image, I'm going to go back down here and just say Fit on Screen. A few that I use quite a bit are Film Grain, and you can see as I click through these what that looks like. This one's called Paint Daubs. I also use watercolor a lot. And you can see on any of these by changing the level of the brush detail, the shadow, the texture, you can kind of create different looks with each of these artistic filters. And it's kind of fun just to like go through them and see all the different kinds of effects that you could get. And remember, this isn't going to be our final image. This is just, we're going to layer with our final rendering to kind of give it a softer look. I'm going to use Paint Daubs, which I use a lot. And I've got brush size set at 7, sharpness set at 36. So it just is kind of this softer, not quite so crisp image of my SketchUp model here. So when I have that as I like, I'm just going to say okay, and I could save that. I already have it saved it as Paint Daubs, but save it as something similar because that's one of the layers I'm going to put together in the end. Next we're going to create the line work that's going to be like an overlay to our final image, and we're going to pull that directly from our SketchUp model. Here is the image we were rendering, and I'm going to create the line work by using one of the styles that comes with SketchUp. So Going to the sketchy edges is really a great place to start. I often use pen black, for example. Maybe I might use pencil. Whatever I use, I am going to turn off the shadows, and that's going to make sure that the background is a nice uniform color. Another thing that I have done, I actually have my own collection of styles that I've created. If I go here and open a collection, you can see this is my SketchUp style folder. And you can see I have a bunch of different styles here. Many of these came from my old friend Form Fonts that I've talked about many times. In Form Fonts, one of the things that you can, or you do get when you purchase a membership, is SketchUp styles. So all these styles that are way above and beyond what naturally comes with SketchUp, you can download and create your own collection like I have here. So I'm going to actually use this one called Fine Line Graphite Sketch. I might want to create a tab, which I've already done here using that line work. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then to get this line work out, I'm just going to export it as a 2D image. So I'm going to go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and here I've already exported it. So what thing I do want to make sure is that the export size, the width, 4,000 pixels, is the same as my original SketchUp rendering that we looked at earlier when we created our blank Photoshop canvas. And I'll say OK and export it. Okay, the next step is just to get all those different layers together and combine them into one image. So here I am back on my Photoshop file where I've imported my first rendering. Then I'm just going to go to File, Place Linked, and I'm going to bring in the Paint Daubs file, which should automatically just line itself up, which it has here. And I can check that if I go to Multiply. I can kind of see how they lay over each other. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Enter. And this one's covering up the final rendering, so all I'm seeing right now is this Paint Daub image. And we're going to blend them together in just a minute. But first of all, I'm also going to place linked the fine line, which is not going to automatically make itself the same size. So I'm just going to go to this Multiply tab again, and that lets me see through the first layer down to the next layer. And then just by adjusting the size and scaling it, I can get these lines. Sometimes it takes a little adjusting, but I'm going to get everything lined up so the lines are lined up with the image behind it. And click Enter. And now I can kind of play with the opacity of the different layers so that I can see this all together. I'm going to go to the Paint Daubs layer, and I'm first going to go to Multiply. And that's going to combine the Paint Daubs layer and my final rendering. It's going to make it look really dark for the moment, but we can fix that with levels later. And then in the opacity, you can see if I move that to the left, Paint Daubs is the layer that's selected. So however I move this, it's going to make that Paint Daub layer just kind of a little shadow, a little ghost, but it's going to kind of soften up that final rendering underneath. I think I'm going to put it to about right here. And then same with the Fine Line tab. I can see that I'm a little off here, so I'm going to see if I can scoot that over a little bit. I'm using the directional arrows to do that. That looks a little better. And the same thing, I'm still on Multiply, but I'm also going to decrease the opacity of that layer just to make it a little softer also. So when I've got all three of these where I think I want them, I'm going to flatten the image. So I am going to go to Layer and Flatten Image. I might want to actually save this first. before I flatten it. Once I flatten it, all my layers are going to disappear. I'm going to just call this compilation. Then I'll go to layer, flatten image, and you can see when I do that, I'm just down to one layer again. But then I can go ahead and adjust the lightness and darkness using the levels, which is kind of the simplest way to do it. If I just go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, I get this called a histograph that shows the variety of dark to light places within my image. And you can see that if I move the one to the left in, it's going to darken everything, or it's going to change the darkest aspects of my image. Same thing if I move it in from the right, it's going to make it all lighter. And if I move it in the middle, that's going to change my midtones. So very often you're going to pull in the left and the right, which is just going to give it a little more contrast. And then I'm going to adjust this middle layer. And I want this to kind of feel like it's a nice bright space. And then I'm going to say, okay. And there I have, in quick little steps, once you get this down, that should be a 15-minute process. So again, here was our initial final rendering. And here's that image that we've created just by, again, creating a paint job layer using Photoshop artistic filters, using a fine line layer, which was using the line work from SketchUp, and then using the multiply and opacity tabs to blend them all together to create a pretty interesting image. So that was an incredibly easy, incredibly fast way to quickly manipulate your images. But you can go so much farther from this. I just want to again refer people back to the site called sketchupartist.org. Here is a bunch of tutorials about even more interesting, complex ways to take your SketchUp model, bring them into Photoshop, and create some really interesting images. You can find this and many, many others by searching online. In fact, that is my plan for the summer. I really want to learn more about using Photoshop to upscale my images. Look at that, how beautiful it is. Anyway, again, my name is Diane Dieterich. My company is C3D, and it's been a pleasure seeing you today. Thanks.